Hello all. So today we are going to see a different example for the normalization just to get the complete hang of it, like how to solve an unnormalized form into one normal form, two normal form and third normal form. So this is what we are going to see. So just to have a recap about what we have done in the last session. So we are given with an unnormalized form. See, this is an ordered process of a computer system. So once we have an unnormalized form, what we have to do is that we need to identify the entity, its attributes and the key. So we have identified this as an order process, and the entity is the order, and these are all the various attributes, and we have considered one as the like order number as the primary key, right? And now we have to identify the repeating data items or the multi-valued attributes. So multi-valued attributes are those attributes which will be repeated for your order number, right? So here you have item number, description, unit cost and quantity. So these are the repeating items. So you have to identify the repeating items in unnormalized form. Then once you have identified the repeating items or multi-valued attributes, what you have to do is that you need to make it into a new entity. You have to make it into a new entity. So that is what you're doing. So these are the repeating ones. You are making it into a new entity, and you are also taking the key along with you. So the key here is order number. So what you have basically done is you have taken item code, description, unit cost, quantity into a different entity, and you have also taken the order number to relate. So now order number is basically your FK for this situation. Now identify a primary key for the table. Now you have to identify a primary key for this table. So for the table item code description, definitely item code is the primary key, and we have also ordered labeled the foreign key, right? Now the next thing which we have to do is that we need to make sure that the order number is both, basically this order number is both part of the composite primary key. So you have to make it as a PFK. So you have given a name for this particular table and you are actually making this as an PFK. So you have this as the PFK because this combination, we are going to take this as a combination the primary key for the composite entity. So this is your composite entity. So this is exactly like while you are solving your MS2N issue. So you are actually taking this as the, but anyway it is an FK, so you have the star here to just show that it is foreign key. Now in the second normal form, what we basically do is that we need to identify the partial dependencies. So how will we find the partial dependencies? Say we have order number and item code as the combination or the composite primary key, right? So we will take the non-key attributes. So here in this particular table, the non-key attributes are description, unit cost, quantity. Description, we will take description. So description, is it fully functionally dependent upon both the keys? Okay, so no, actually description is basically relevant or fully functionally dependent upon only part of the primary key, that is item code only. So there is a partial dependency which exists here. And what about unit cost? Unit cost is also dependent upon the only on the item code, not on the combination of order number and item code. Now what about quantity? Yes, quantity is basically dependent on both order number and item code. So now you have identified that there is a partial dependency for description and unit cost to this composite primary key, because description and unit cost depends only on the item code in this combination of primary key. So there is a partial dependency. So if you have a partial dependency, now what you have to do is that you need to remove this attribute into a new entity. So description, unit cost, and it is completely dependent upon item code. So you will take this as a new entity. Okay, say its name is item code. Now what you have to do is that, but your quantity is still dependent on both. So what you have to do is that you are taking the complete description and unit cost, which is completely fully functional dependent on item code and you are making item code as a primary key, and now you need to keep this item code back here as a foreign key. Okay, and as you know that this quantity is actually dependent upon the combination of this primary key. Now this item code will become a PFK, that is primary foreign key, right? So now quantity is fully functionally dependent upon these two. A description and unit cost is fully functionally dependent upon item code. Okay, so this is nothing but your this is how you will solve the partial dependency. Now moving over to the third normal form, you need to identify the non-key dependencies. So when you look at here, description and unit cost, it is fully functionally dependent on item code. So there is no non-key dependency. When you look at the quantity, which is the non-key, it is fully functionally dependent upon these two. So you don't have any non-key dependencies. Now when you look at here, the order date is dependent on order number, yes, but this customer number, customer name, address, contact number, so all these things are basically dependent on customer number more than the order number. So basically we can take this and put it as a separate table. So you are considering this. So when you remove these attributes into a new entity, so you are actually removing them into a new entity, and when you are taking everything completely, and you are keeping this customer number as your primary key. But again, you need to relate these two tables. So what will you do? You have to keep this customer number back in the order table as a foreign key. So as it is a foreign key, you are keeping a star here. Leave the customer number behind as a foreign key, right? So this is the final form which you could see as your third normal form. So this is how you will actually resolve when your complete structure, if you could see, you could understand that you have order, customer, order item, and item, and this will be your complete structure for the the design for your table. So this is how you would have solved, and this is about the recap. So when you look at the when you are given with the unnormalized form, you have to convert it into 1NF, where you will remove the multi-valued attributes, and then you will convert it into second normal form, where you will eliminate the partial dependencies, and then you will convert it back into third normal form, where you will actually eliminate the non-key dependencies. So when you have followed all this, finally your entity relationship diagram will be in a complete normalized form, which will confine to first, second, and third normal forms, right? So now we will see about another example where where we will try to identify and try to understand how to perform this upon a second example. I mean like it's a different example. So in this particular example, you are given with a data like an unnormalized form is basically given to you. So in this particular form, so this is a transport and removal company which specialized in removals for large corporate clients, and the manager of Reed & Co has a system for allocating removal vans to clients. So there are certain business rules which are given to you. So if you want, you can actually pause this and read this, okay, to have a clear understanding about it. And the current system uses two books. So this is actually, here there is a client book which is given, and so this is starting with the client number, and there is another book. So this is also a client book. So both the books are the same, copies of the books for the same different clients. And this is the second book, where the second book contains the removal of the vans, and each removal van has got a registration number to allocate a van to a removal of the, you have this client book. So this is your second book, where you have the van details. Okay, so the first book is related to the client number, and the second book is related to the van details or the vehicle details. So this is how it is actually given to you. So all these things which are written here are basically important when these are the business rules which you will be using for completing your final diagram. Okay, once you have identified all the details, then you have to actually come out with your final design. So all these rules will be really important when you are, so these are the business rules which you will be using for building your complete system. So now looking over to the data, okay, so now we will try to relate and follow the steps to come out with how we can actually do it. So in the unnormalized form, so this is the unnormalized form which is given. So once you are given with the unnormalized form, what is that for which you have to first do? You need to find out an entity and you need to identify all the attributes and you need to come out with a possible primary key. So you're given with same book, I mean like, two copies of the book of two different client. So here the client number is 0921, here the client number is 2711. So this is the same books only but of different clients. So if you're given with two different books like this or details like this, you need to go through all the details to identify which all could be the multi-valued attributes, because in this sometimes they might not have, you wouldn't have in this table, you wouldn't have any multi-valued attributes, but when you check over to the second table you would have some multi-valued attributes. So if you are given the copies of similar kind of things, just make sure that you're going through both the details carefully to clearly identify which all are the multi-valued attributes. So here probably you have this client number, client telephone, all this client details, all this vehicle details, and you also have the shipment details. So probably I will call this as a shipment table because it gives me the complete details about shipment and details about to where I'm sending, to which client I'm sending, to which vehicle I'm using. All these details are basically given here. So probably I will call this as a shipment table. So I'm identifying this table as a shipment table. Okay, now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to write all the attributes. So the attributes here is client number, client name, client address, and the client telephone number. Yes, and then I have shipment number, insurance reference, from, to, date, van, and so all this information. Then van registration, model, make, capacity, so all this information. Now I need to identify the repeating items or the multi-valued attributes from this particular table. So in order to identify that, okay, for this particular shipment number, okay, I have van, convoy. Okay, here I have two details. So here I have two van registration numbers, okay, and then two different model, two make, and two different capacity. So definitely this details, van registration, model, make, and capacity, are multi-valued attributes or repeating attributes. Now I will again, for the sake of it, I'll just go and check here in the second client table. So in the second client table, this is of the client 2711. So here also, if I could see, all these details are not repeated, but from the van registration number I could see the details are basically repeated. So the repeating items from both the tables if I could see, and if I look at this one, this van registration model, all these things are basically incorporated here. So everything is included in this table itself. Okay, so I will write all those attributes and I will identify this van registration, model, make, and capacity as the repeating items or multi-valued attributes. So this is nothing but my UNF. Okay, and I have given the name shipment. I have identified a particular, this is the shipment table. So I have identified shipment number as my PK. Okay, and I have entered all the related attributes. Okay, and I have also identified the repeating items. Okay, now moving over to the next one, that is I need to make sure that my data is in 1NF. So I identified there are multi-valued attributes, so it is not in 1NF, right? So what I need to do is that if I have identified the repeating items, I need to make it as a separate table. So in my 1NF, I will keep all the other details intact. I will take all these details and put it into a different table, right? So maybe I will call it as a vehicle shipment, because in multi-valued attributes anyway I am coming out with a composite entity. So probably I will give a name which is more more understandable. So I will call it as vehicle shipment, and I have made this van registration as the primary key of the table, and also according to the algorithm I need to take the key along with me. So I'm taking shipment number along with it to the as part of this vehicle shipment table. Now it is an FK and I need to make sure that it is a composite entity, right? It's a composite entity, so I will make both of them as a combination of the primary key, we'll make it as PK and PFK. So this is nothing but now the table is in 1NF. Okay, so I have identified the repeating items in UNF. I have made it into a separate table. Okay, now what did I do? I have to make sure that there is a PK for this. So the PK for this is van registration. So that is my PK, and it is also told in the algorithm to take the key along with me. Okay, so I have identified the, see here, so it is also told that take the key with you. Okay, say even when we were actually seeing this particular example, we took all this information, we made this item code as the PK, and we took the key along with us. So now when we take the key along with us, label it as foreign key. So this is your foreign key. Now what you have to do is that you need to make sure that it is a compound primary key. So we made both of them as the primary key. So this is your PFK and PK. So that's why we have put a star here. So the same way here, what we are doing is that we are taking the shipment number along with us as the foreign key. Now as it is it has to be in 1NF, we are making this as a composite primary key. So when you make it as a composite primary key, it will become a PFK. Okay, and we are putting a star here to just make sure that it is FK as well. So now this table is in 1NF. Now what you have to do, now you need to make sure that, so now you have actually removed the multi-valued attributes by splitting your table, right? Now you need to make sure that the table is in 2NF. So for that, what you have to do is that, so this is your table, right? This is your composite entity. So in the composite entity, you need to make sure which are the non-key attributes. The non-key attributes are model, make, and capacity. Now what you have to do is that, now you need to make sure that the non-key attributes are, do you have any partial dependencies? That is what you have to identify. So when we take model, we need to make sure that is model dependent on both the keys or only one of the keys. When we take make, we need to make sure that we need to identify whether the make is dependent on both the keys or one of the keys. If we take capacity, we need to make sure that is it dependent on one of the keys or both the keys. But when you look at the model is actually dependent only on vehicle registration, because it is very clearly given here also that model, make, and capacity is actually related to your vehicle registration. So here when you look at here, model, make, and capacity is basically related to vehicle registration. So now you have identified a partial dependency. They are only dependent on vehicle registration and not on shipment number. So now what you have to do, now you have to split your table to make sure that it is in 2NF. So how will you split it? You have to actually take the items. Okay, so once you have identified those entities which are dependent on one of the keys, you have to remove those attributes into a new entity and take the copy of the attribute that is dependent upon. Okay, so now these are the three attributes which are dependent upon van registration, and take a copy of it. So you will make it as a different table. So you are making it as a different table, and you are making the van registration as the PK. Okay, you are making the van registration as the PK. Now what you have to do, you have to make sure that this van registration is here as FK, and in the vehicle shipment, both of them has to be what? Primary key. There is no change in all those. The only difference which you have done is that you have made this van registration as PFK and given a star here. This is the only difference which you have actually done when you look at this 1NF table. Okay, in the vehicle shipment, here it is actually PK, but as there is a partial dependency, you are taking this all these details and putting it into a different table. So now you have actually made it everything into a different table, right? And you have given the name vehicle. Now what you have to do, you have to keep this van registration as an FK here, and moreover in this vehicle shipment it has to be PFK, right? It has to be this, both of them has to be a combination of primary key. I mean, like the primary key will be a combination of both, right? So you need to make this also as the PFK and put a star. Okay, so now it is in 2NF. Now what you have to do in the third normal form, for the third normal form, you are planning to remove the non-key dependencies. Okay, so when you look at this, model, make, and capacity is fully functionally dependent on vehicle registration, so no problem. And here you don't have any non-key attributes at all, so everything is fine. Now the third one is basically this one. This is the table. So in this particular table, if you could see, you have this client number, name, address, number, because all this insurance from to etc. is dependent on shipment number itself, so no problem. But this client number, this is basically non-keys and they are related to each other. So if you have non-key relationship, what you have to do, dependencies, what you have to do, you need to move it into a different table. So in the third normal form, what you will do is that you will take everything as a, all those attributes which has got non-key attributes which has got relationship to each other. Say if you identified a non-key, remove these attributes into a new entity. Okay, so that is what you are doing. So you have actually removed it into a new entity, and then customer number, you have identified a primary key for that, then leave a key behind as the foreign key. So this is exactly what you are doing here. So here in this example, so you have taken this as a separate entity and you have considered the client number as the PK. Now you should have some relationship between this client and shipment, right? So what will you do? You will actually keep this client number as the FK in the shipment table and you will put a star, right? So this is how basically, so now you have actually removed the non-key dependencies. So this is how basically you will actually make an unnormalized table into a table of 1NF, where you remove the multi-valued attributes, into a 2NF table or second normal form where you remove the partial dependencies, and in the 3NF where you remove the non-key dependencies. So hope you understood this particular problem. So you're given with an unnormalized table and how you can actually convert it into 1NF, 2NF and 3NF by removing all the three dependencies. Now let's see about another example which is given here. So here, a lecturer teaches a number of different courses and there are so many different rules which are given. Okay, and the table is also given. So you need to complete this example. So what you will do is you are given with the lecturer number, name, faculty, location, course code, all this info. So this is about a complete lecture, like what are the courses a lecturer take and what would be his starting date, the etc. So this is an unnormalized table which is given to you. So once you have got an unnormalized table, what is the first step that you have to do? So I'm always bringing back this example because just to make you know that this is the same format that we are basically following. So we need to identify an entity, attribute, key, and we need to also find out the repeating items. So this is what we are going to do. So I identify this particular table as a lecturer table. Okay, so I identify this as a lecturer table, and in this lecturer table I will basically consider this lecturer number as a possible primary key. Okay, now I need to identify all the entities, that is name, faculty, office location, course code, course start date and weekly time. So all this as the attributes, and in that I need to identify the repeating items. So when you look at it, this is a repeating item, that is course code, and this course is a repeating item, start date is a repeating item, weekly time is a repeating item, right? So because I don't have any other table or anything which is actually given, so these are the repeating items. So now once you have found the repeating item, this is the way which I need to write. So when you look at this, all the repeating items, there should be some space which is given over here, and I will write all the repeating items, right? So this is how you have to write the repeating items. Now, so this is your UNF. Now, once you got the data in UNF, what you have to do, you need to make sure that it is in 1NF. So how will you do that? Yes. So I have all this repeating items. So I will take them as a separate entity. Remove the repeating items into a new entity and take the key with you, which is the key which they are referring to now. They are referring to the parent table key. Okay. So when you look at here, I will consider all this into a different table. Okay. So when you look at here, I have course code, course name, start date, weekly time, everything as the I have taken everything into a new table, and I am taking the lecture number along with it. So I am taking the lecture number also, and I am giving the name course lecture, so that it will make me understand by seeing the table or entity itself. I could understand that it is a composite entity. Now what I need to do, it should be a composite key. So in the table it is very clearly given. It is actually given it has to be a compound primary key, right? So it has to be a compound primary key. So I have actually kept the course code as a primary key and the lecture number as the PFK. So I'm considering lecture number and course code as a combination of the primary keys. Okay, so now this is the 1NF. Okay, this is completely the 1NF. Now what I need to do, I need to make sure that it is in 2NF. In 2NF, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to find out the partial dependency. So when you look at the course name, it is completely dependent upon course code. Okay, it is completely dependent upon the course code. Okay, but when you look at the weekly time and the start date, it is actually in fact both related to the course and to the lecturer. Both of them are actually, you know, completely dependent upon it, right? Fully functionally dependent upon this, both, combination of both. But when you look over to this course name, it is partially dependent upon this combination of the key, because this course name is dependent only on the course code. But when you look at the start date and the weekly time, they are actually fully functionally dependent upon this combination of keys. I hope you are able to understand. So there is a partial dependency. What is a partial dependency? The partial dependency here is based on this course name is partially dependent upon this combination of primary key. Okay, what is the combination of the primary key here? The combination of the primary here is lecture number and the course code, but the course name is only dependent only on the course code alone, not this one. Okay, so that is a partial dependency which you have identified. So once you have identified the partial dependency, what you have to do? So once you have identified the partial dependency, you have to keep them into a different table. Okay, you have to take them, remove those attributes into a new entity and take the copy of the attribute along with you, which is dependent upon along with you. So in the second normal form, what you will do is you will take that course code and course name and you will take the copy. You know, this course name is actually dependent on this course code, so you have taken the copy of it along with it and you have made it as a primary key. Now what you have to do, this primary key here will become the FK, and as it is part of the primary key, it will be PFK, and you need to make sure that you are putting the star here. Okay, so this is nothing but this is how you will actually eliminate the partial dependencies. Okay, so now the start date and weekly time, if you see, it is fully functionally dependent upon this combination, right? And when you look at the course name, it is fully functionally dependent upon this PK. So now this is how you have actually, you will eliminate the partial dependency in the second normal form. Okay, now looking over to the third normal form. Okay, what you have to do, you need to consider, or you need to make sure that check whether is there any non-key dependencies. But when you look at this name, faculty, office, location, all of them are basically dependent and fully functionally dependent on lecturer number. So there is no non-key dependencies which are here. Okay, and when you look at the start date and the weekly time, it is fully functionally dependent, and course name is also fully functional. So it is already in 3NF and you don't have to do anything in specific to make it into 3NF. So this is exactly what I wanted to tell. So you have actually, see here, if you look at the lecturer and the course, you have actually come out with a composite entity. Okay, the course lecture. So when you look at it, the lecture can have multiple courses and the course can have multiple lecturers, right? I mean, like say if DB1 is taken by, you know, multiple teachers, okay, you can have multiple lecturers. So this is kind of an MS2N relationship when you look at these two, lecturer and course. So you have actually come out with a composite entity, course lecture, where you have 1:n relationship. I mean, like the course can have 0 or more lecture, but one course lecture will be, you know, associated with, you know, just one lecturer, right? So in the same way on the opposite side, so this is exactly how you have actually, you know, you don't have any 3NF here, but otherwise, you know, this is exactly what I'm trying to say. So you are actually, you know, whatever you have done before, this is exactly what you're doing, but you are just following the rules so that, you know, finally when you get your whole design, that design itself is normalized. That's all. Okay. Now we will see this third example where, you know, a college currently uses use of a paper-based system to keep track of the exams that students sit. Due to tight schedule, it is possible that the student sits more than one exam in a day. Okay, details of the examination is, so this is a student record and details of the subjects taught are stored on the card, and the subject has only one program leader and part of the subject card is basically given below. So these are all the attributes which you have. Okay, so this is all about the student writing certain exams. So this is the unnormalized form which is given to you. So when you're given with an unnormalized form, what you have to do, you need to come out with the entity. So we are following the same example again and again. Okay, so here when you look at this, you know, identify an entity, attributes, key, and the repeating items. That is the first step which we have to do. So now, we are considering it as a student entity, where you have student ID, name, student, year, yes, and then date of exam, date, time of exam, subject ID, and this is basically related, so you can even include them. So subject name, PL ID, PL name, PL mobile number. So all those attributes. So from both the tables, you have actually included all these attributes, right? So all these attributes are basically included. Now what you have to do, you need to identify the repeating item. So, maybe say this student itself is writing 2 exams on the same day, different timings, okay, different subject, okay. So basically these are the repeating items, okay, because one COM itself will be written by multiple students like this, okay. So this is how you have to keep in mind that in the PLID, PL name, etc., everything is basically repeated here, okay, because when you look at the subject ID, all these things are basically repeated. So this is the combination, this is the connection between them, okay. So when I say net 101, okay, when I say net 101, this net 101 is basically repeated here, okay. So all these things are basically repeated. So when you look at, so the PLID, PL name, PL mobile number, everything is basically repeated. So these are the repeating items. So once you have found the repeating items, what you have to do, so now this is multi-valued attribute. So what you have to do is that you have to remove them into a different table. So you're removing them into a different table. Now you are actually say subject ID, say you are just keeping subject ID as your PK. You have to take the student ID and put it here and make it as an FK, and as it is a compound entity, you are making both of them as the primary keys. So you are putting a star for the foreign key, and you are putting all this information here. So now it is in 2N, it is in 1NF. Now what you have to do, now you need to consider the non-key attributes, right? So you need to consider the non-key attributes to see whether there is any partial dependency. So when you take so here, so the second step is basically finding the partial. So the second stage is basically finding the partial dependencies. So this is your first normal form, and for finding the partial dependencies, actually because of this tables which is given over here, it's very easy, right? Because here you have this subject ID. So subject ID and student ID, okay, subject ID and student ID is here. So date of the exam and time of the exam is basically dependent on both subject ID and student ID, okay. So date of the exam and time of the exam is dependent on both, okay. Now what about the subject name, PL name, PL ID, and also all these things, subject name, PL ID, PL name, PL number is basically dependent only on subject ID, right? Only on subject ID. So there is definitely some partial dependencies, okay. It is not dependent on both, it is actually dependent from this table itself. It is understood that it is dependent only on the what is that, only on subject ID. So there is a partial dependency. So what you have to do, so again when you go back here in the after this first normal form, so once you have identified them, then what you have to do, you need to put them into a you need to put them into a separate table. So remove these entities and put it into a new one, and take the copy of the attribute they are dependent upon. That is what we are trying to do. So now what we will do is that we know that date of the exam and time of the exam are dependent on both, so we are retaining it there. But subject name, PLID, PL name, PL mobile number is dependent only on subject ID. How are you telling that it is dependent only on subject ID? Because from the table itself it is actually clear, okay. From the table itself it is clear that subject name, PLID, PL name, mobile number is dependent only on subject ID. So there is a partial dependency. So now we are removing them, okay. So what we will do is that in the second normal form, we will divide, or we will keep this subject name, PLID, PL name, PL mobile number along with the PK, okay, subject ID, okay, and we are keeping it as PK. Now in order to have a relationship between both the tables, what you have to do, you need to keep the subject ID as a FK, and the combination has to be a primary key. So student ID and subject ID, you are keeping it as both as PFKs, and you are keeping a star, okay. So this is exact, here it is. So in your first normal form it has to be a compound, right? So that's why you are actually making it here. So now when you look at here, you are actually taking removing all the entities into a new as a new entity, and you are taking the copy of the attribute they are dependent upon, okay. You are taking that, the item code becomes, say here, and you need to make sure that you are actually keeping it as a foreign key, okay. You're keeping it as a foreign key. So when you look at it, basically when you look at this one, okay, you have actually taken subject name, PLID, PL name, mobile number, etc. as your along with the subject ID, you have made the PK subject ID as the PK. Now, in order to relate both of them, you are actually keeping the subject ID as an FK, but as per the first normal form, what you have to do, this should be a composite primary key. So, you are keeping both of them as the PFK and you are keeping a star here. Okay, so now this is nothing but this is in the second normal form. Now what you have to do, you need to identify the non-key dependencies. So if you want to identify the non-key dependencies, so when you have to identify the non-key dependencies, what you have to do is that when you look at here, okay, say you have the student name and student year. I think both of them are dependent only on the student ID, so they don't have any non-key dependencies here. Now when you look at this table, date of the exam and time of the exam, both of them are fully functionally dependent upon this. So there is also no non-key, like dependencies which are there. But when you look at here, okay, this third table which we have formed, the subject ID, subject name, then you have this PL ID, PL name, PL mobile number. So these are the non-key attributes. From the non-key attributes, if you could see, there is a dependency between PL ID, name and mobile number. So this PL name and PL mobile number is actually dependent on this PL ID, right? So there is a non-key dependency which exists here. So what you have to do, so if you have found some non-key dependencies which is existing over there, what you have to do is that remove these attributes into a new entity, find out a primary key. That is what you have to do, and leave the key which you found as a foreign key in here. So in the third normal form, what you will do is that you will keep everything intact, but from this subject table, you are taking the PLID, PL name and mobile number and putting it as a new table, okay, new entity or a new relation. You are keeping the PLID as the primary key. Now, in order to relate these two tables, what you have to do, you need to keep the PLID as the foreign key here, and you are actually keeping a star in order to make sure that it is a foreign key, right? So this is what you have, you can do. So now when you look at the table, you don't have any multi-valued attributes, you don't have any partial dependencies, or you don't have any non-key dependencies in this table. So now you could say that your table is in in 3NF. So when you look at it at the final stage, you will have the student and subject, and you will have the student subject. So here is where you are actually eliminating all the multi-valued attributes. Then you will have another table which is PL, where you have an FK relationship between these two, right? So this is exactly how you will actually finally when you draw this particular entities, okay, the third normal form, when you draw it, you could see that your table itself has become into it is already in normalized form. It actually satisfies everything, and you have this multi-valued attributes which is resolved, and partial key dependencies resolved, and non-key attributes resolved. So all these things are basically resolved if you follow this particular steps. Okay, so in this video, we have simply gone through certain examples to identify how we can actually convert a unnormalized form into 1NF, where we remove the multi-valued attributes, and convert it into 2NF, where we remove the partial dependencies, and where we convert it into 3rd NF or 3NF, where we remove all the non-key dependencies. So this is a small example for normalization. So hope you understood all these examples, and you can pause the video, try these examples to have a clear understanding about it. So please go through it, and if you have any doubts, get back to me. Thank you so much.